Hey, welcome back to the channel. Got a little something on the bench for you here. So this is a sketch drawing that I've done, concept or idea that I've come up with to enhance or improve the gripper capability of my rescue drone. So in this video, what I'd like to do is explain how do we go from a concept, whether you sketched it, drew it out, or modeled it with clay, to a finished model that works. Something that's going to take care of the job, and then also to go from thought process to a working model, and then even get a little savvy and create a piece that's improved over the original design that you might have found on Thingiverse. So we'll go from concept to a finished piece and the steps in between. So let's get started. All right, so the working model that I've come up with, I found the file on Thingiverse. I think this is a good idea because if you've already kind of got a drawing or an idea of something that you want, and you go on Thingiverse and you find somebody's already kind of, mapped it out, there's really no reason to reinvent the wheel. So on Thingiverse, I found a file that kind of had the dimensions that I was looking for, the gear ratio, everything was kind of laid out. There's some things that I didn't like about it, so that's something I needed to do, is modify that. Now I kind of gave a shout out to the community who might be able to 3D print this for me. And the more I thought about it, I'm in this hobby deep enough. It's time. So I went ahead and got the Saval 01. And so far I've really liked that machine. I don't really want to get into like specifications. I think there's a lot of videos out there already of how to do certain things with that printer. This video I'd like to focus on kind of the process. There's that's the video I looked for. I didn't find it. I'm sure it's out there, but how do you go from this to this in each step? So let's take a look at Thingiverse first, before we look at Tinkercad, because you're going to need Tinkercad to modify a file or reinvent the wheel. I mean, if you want to design the thing completely from scratch, you can do that in Tinkercad. So let's take a look real quick at Thingiverse, and we'll pull this file up and then also give a thumbs up to the person that has generated the original. All right, so we're over here at Thingiverse, and I just put in a little search for a servo gripper so we can kind of see some of these Arduino robotic arms and the little micro servo grippers. And here's the one that I found that I thought matched closest to what I was looking for. So this is the person that created this file, and so we'll give a thumbs up and appreciation to this person for putting in the effort and work to design the original that I modify to my needs in Tinkercad. So we just need to download this file. And now the thing is, there's 3 files here. So there's the left side, right side, and the base. So if you look here, the original design finished working model is pictured here. And then we have each piece. So we have the different arms and then the base that the servo slides up through. And then of course it gives you an idea how large it is. So these 3 files here are the ones that we want to take into Tinkercad to modify, because they're not exactly, this isn't exactly what I wanted as a finished result. If this is the end of it, then you can go straight to Cura and slice this and print it. So let's talk a little bit more about the modifying of this. So let's jump over to Tinkercad. Okay, so we're in Tinkercad. This is an amazing free program. This is something that I've kind of worked with a little bit, and just to modify some things to that original design. There's tutorials and all kinds of things. There's a lot of content on YouTube already of Tinkercad, so there's no sense in going through all that in this video. But I just wanted you to know that there's some modifications that I've made. I've thickened, I've tried different things. I've had like holes in it to save some weight, which is not working out. I put a round end on here, and that was just to keep the end from wedging into the flight controller when I pick up the other quadcopter off the ground. I didn't want to wedge in between the flight controller and ESC, so I put a round blunt end on it to keep that from happening. And then also I've modified some other things. So in Tinkercad you can basically modify and rearrange any shapes that you want. So you can have all these individual shapes. Let's take a look at the modified arm, the drive arm. In this design, I've added all these different shapes and all these different pieces to the original design. Okay, so I've changed the hull a little bit. I've modified this little piece here. Let's look at this on the bench so we can explain it a little better. So over here on the bench, let me zoom in on this piece. Alright, you can see that pretty good. So here we have the modification that I've done. I've added this block in here. The original design had, I'm pretty sure, gluing this servo arm into position because it's very difficult to 3D print that ratchet inside here for the servo. So you put your servo arm in there and glue it. But I had them break loose, and they would slide around, and then the gripper arm would be open. So I've modified it with this piece. I've also modified this end. So let's jump back over to Tinkercad, and you can see, let me first rotate this around. Oops. So this is silver PLA, and it's called silk. So it's really shiny. It's kind of like pewter, like the old chess set. So let's jump back to Tinkercad, so now you can see the digital rendering. So here's the final piece. Alright, so in Tinkercad here, we got that piece put in place, and then I filled in one of the teeth, so the gap between here, I filled that in with a couple different shapes. And then down here I made my blunt end instead of the sharp end, and then I just kind of thickened the end of that arm up a little bit. So now you see these gray spots. So when you choose, let's just grab this for example. I don't really want to do a tutorial on how to work Tinkercad because it took a little bit of time, but you can modify this piece. You can flip it around, you can rotate it, you can tip it up on its axis, so you can any which way. Super fun stuff. Let me see here. And then once you're done making your piece, you can actually turn it into a void. So if you take this over here and you put it into your design like that, and then let's grab the whole piece and we'll group it. Okay, so once you group the piece, now that's the final piece. That's what you're looking at, you know, on the 3D printer, and this is how you're going to save it. I don't want to save it with this cutout, but that gives you an idea. Sorry, I don't have my mouse down here, but this gives you an idea of what this piece will look like finished. So let's say we don't want that. Before we send that off to the printer, let's not have that big chunk. So we can, oops, click off of it here, and then let's grab that out of there. We'll grab that and delete. And now we'll grab our finished piece, group it. Alright, and so here's our completed piece. Oops. And yes, it does take a little bit of time to figure this out, but it's really neat to kind of come up with your own idea and make it the way you want it, you know. So we'll export that file, and you'll export it. I'm exporting things right now. Please leave it in comments if you know a better way, or you have a tutorial that explains something a little bit further, put it in comments, give a detailed description of what your video is explaining, and post away. But I save in an STL file, and this is what Cura is going to look at, the slicing software. Cura is basically the communication between this and the printer. So I'll go ahead and save this on my desktop. Alright, so now we have our piece finished and grouped on Tinkercad and saved in a STL file. So now we need to take it into Cura. And what Cura is going to do, you see these printing lines? So this is the direction the print went. All of that information needs to be translated to the 3D printer. So that's what we're going to do next. So let's jump back to the computer and we'll look at some Cura. Okay, so we're over here in Cura, and this is also a free software. And here's the piece that we're working on. So we can zoom in a little bit and see that. All the different angles. I apologize I didn't bring a mouse with me to articulate this around while we're looking at it, but you get the idea. So once you have your piece and you can kind of see that there's no weird glitches or strange things, the original design in Tinkercad had all of these parameters, but with my Saval 01 printer, the tip, the orifice that's ejecting the PLA is a 0.2 millimeters. So we have our height, layer height, and infill. The infill is something that you're going to have to decide on. If you have cutouts and certain impressions and they're falling through or they're drooping, you're going to need more infill. With this design here, 20% infill was fine. And those are the just basic things that I'm looking at. And then the PLA, the manufacturer said the printing temperature is at 200 and the glass bed on the printer's 50, and everything else was pretty much default. Now I like to use a skirt. They have a brim and a raft. Let me show you what a raft looks like real quick. So for example, this is the piece that I printed, the first thing that I printed. This actually comes ready to go on your Saval printer, and I think most printers have a default file that they print, and it kind of gives you an idea of the quality that it's going to print and the alignment, whether your bed's level, all those sort of things. But this is a raft. It printed this layer first so that this was adhered to the bed of the printer. Okay, let me move some of this out of the way. So the first thing was the printer just printed out this, and then it started to print this, and when it was done you could just basically peel that off. So this is a raft. I've kind of learned over almost 100 prints now how to adhere a single line. So I don't use rafts for the designs that I've been doing, but if you're having it here, it's not adhering correctly, you can use a raft. Let's jump back over here to Cura. So let's zoom in on this piece here a little bit. So the raft, if I were to choose a raft, this would all be filled in with PLA. And I don't want to do that because I've learned how to make a single line adhere to the bed. So I don't have any issues with that. So the PLA that I'm using, I'm just going to put a couple lines around it, and that kind of gets me started. So when we go to the 3D printer, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is called a skirt. So there's just like the 3D printer just kind of does 3 loops around your piece, and then it starts to print the actual piece. And you can see these layers. If you take this all the way down, here's the very first layer, and then the next layer, and then the infill. So this is the infill. This is the part that you have to decide on how much of this infill, because when you start to put layers on top of that, if it droops between here or it falls down between here, then obviously you're going to need more infill. But with this particular piece, I've already printed a whole bunch of them, so I can break them in the field and not worry about it. So I know that my infill is fine, but you can actually watch each layer be built. Okay, So I don't want to get too much into this software, or this video is going to be enormously long, and we don't want to do that. So all we need to do is save this to a disk. So in my case, I'm going to save it to a micro SD card. Let's go ahead and jump back to the bench, and we're done with our software. We're ready to print this piece. Okay, so we're over here at the printer, and this is my Saval 01. This is the printer I decided to go with for whatever reasons. I guess I could get into those reasons if you really want, but we have our SD card. So we're ready to plug that in. So we'll just put this into the printer. Okay, and now the first thing we want to do is just kind of real quick check our bed to make sure it's leveled. Like I said, I don't really want to get into this long drawn out how to work this machine. There's a lot of tutorials out there. The one thing I'd like to show is a couple things that I do. So I just get some regular rubbing alcohol, and I just want to clean the area where I'm going to print. Okay, so make sure that's clean. Now we'll go ahead and turn the machine on. Okay, now we're zoomed into the screen, so we'll just take our knob here, and we can turn our knob, push in, and we want to prepare. Now if we want to, we can go straight to print. So if we've already printed something and we know our bed's ready to go, everything's fine, we can just go to print. But here we want to go to prepare, and then we want to go down to PLA, so preheat. So when we hit preheat PLA, our settings for PLA are going to warm the bed and also the head of the printer. So if we hit preheat PLA, it'll do both the bed and the hot end. So that's what we want to do. So go ahead and get it all ready. All right, so see how the bed, it's set for 185 and 45. That's the preheat temperatures. The print will be 250. So the glass bed will warm up to 50 degrees. Right now it's only 40 degrees. The printer head will warm up to 185. And here's what I like to do when that happens. So now that our bed is warming up, so we can kind of feel, yeah, it's pretty warm. So any warpage that might be happening to this bed will have already happened. Now that it's warmed up quite a bit, I mean it's 50 degrees, so it's pretty warm. So now what we can do is we can put in our PLA, and right now I have just a little piece in here. So let me zoom out a little bit more. All right, so we have the temperatures coming up, so our bed is kind of warm, so nice and toasty. And our hot end is up to 185 degrees, so the PLA should be melting. When I'm finished printing, I just cut the PLA filament. I just cut it off. I just leave it, cool it down, whatever. And when I'm ready, I come back. I will take and pull back on my drive wheel, and I'll push this down, and I'll pull it out. Okay, so now this is nice and clean, and you can see that the tip of that, let me zoom in, you can see the tip of that came out of the orifice of the printer head. So the hot end, so it should be nice and clean in there. So I push down on it, and it will squirt out some. So now I like to keep my PLA in a Ziploc bag. I know there's a billion ways of doing things, but this is how I do it. And then inside that bag, I just got on Amazon and bought a bag of silica gel desiccant. So I put a bunch of these little packets in there, so the filament stays really dry. That silica is, I mean, that's the same thing they put in diapers, industrial air compressors and stuff, to get the water out of the air. So that filament should be bone dry. And we're just going to go ahead and load this up. I don't have this connected, so we just got to put a little edge on that so it bypasses There's a little micro switch inside here. So now we can pull that down through. I don't have this connected because usually when I'm printing something, I'm working on the bench. So we're just going to take this down, and before I put this in here, I just take it all the way to the bed, and that's how long I need it. So they give you these too. So let's zoom in a little bit further on the print head. All right, so what I like to do is I like to pull this trigger back. That trigger takes the tension off of the drive wheel. So this is a direct drive. So your filament is directly driven into the hot end instead of going through a Bowden tube, which the filament then would be driven somewhere up the line. So I just take my filament, put it in here, pull back on the trigger, hold that back, and then I fit this down into the hot end. And then I can feel where it's being melted, and I just want to push that down. I'm holding the drive wheel back, and I'm just pushing that filament down in there. I want to fill that void. I don't want any air in there. So now when the filament's all melted, it'll come out the other end. So as you can see, that came out the other end. Okay, so we're just going to grab that. We're not worried about it. And now we just need to check our bed. So let's check that real quick. So we're just going to click on prepare, and then we're going to auto home. Okay. And now the bed will go to the position it needs to, and the printer head will go to its home position. Alright, now that the printer head has found its home position, we want to come back over here and we want to hit prepare, and we're going to disable the stepper motors. Okay, so now we can come back over here, and we're just going to take a piece of 20, this is just 20-pound bond paper. There's nothing special, it's your copier paper. And we're just going to slide that under the printer head, and we're going to grab our knob, and depending on the tension that we have on the knob, how much tight or loose, I want to feel the paper being drugged. You know, I can move this real simple. You know, it's not binding up, you know, it's sliding under the head, but I can feel the tip of the hot end. Okay? And then carefully, I want to pull the bed out, and I want to push this head over to the other end, and I want it to do the same thing. And it is. You can adjust these knobs down here, but if you're really out of whack, when I first set this up, let me zoom out. All right, you want to do that to all 4 of the knobs and make sure that piece of paper just kind of drags a little bit. You don't want it too loose, or the bed will kind of smush away from the printer head. Okay, so the hot end will kind of push it around. So you don't want it too loose. You want those knobs to be fairly tight. If one side, like in my case, when I first put this together, this frame was out of square. When I put this all together, this side and that side were not matching up. There's a whole process of raising and lowering that. I don't want to get into that in this video, but I wanted to let you know, I physically took, just like you would a car door to realign your car door, I took and stretched, pulled and twisted this frame into place, and now it's nice and square. So I just wanted to let you know that that does happen, and I had to bend and twist on the frame a little bit to square it up. But now that we know that our bed is level, okay, so we heated everything up, it's all level, and the pinch point is correct, we're ready to print. So let me go ahead and zoom in, and I'm going to show you kind of what I'm doing to get it to print nice and smooth. All right, so our hot end and our bed is still nice and warm. I still have the stepper motors disabled so I can move things around. Everything looks good. The bed is nice and clean. I've cleaned it with alcohol, so it should stick pretty good. And I'm just using, this is the PLA The PLA that I'm using here is just the standard PLA that they gave us with the printer. So this is stock printer filament, if you will. So we're going to go over here to our screen, and we're going to print our file. All right, and that's the file that I want. So I click on that, and now you'll watch things warm up a little bit more. All right, so what I like to do is I like to, when it's getting ready to print, everything's warming up, I like to go get ready and go into, let me go back, I think I went too quick. So we're at the info screen, things are heating up, so we got 200, this is about to print. What I like to do is I like to go to tune, and then I like to zip down here to baby step Z. So right now we're at zeros, and now we can modify how thick that line is by the tiniest increments. All right, so we're getting ready to print here. Now you see that first line, this first line here, it's not even sticking. It didn't even stick to the bed. And that's because our line isn't being pushed against the bed enough. So it's not even sticking. So now we can go to that Z axis and we can change it to negative number. A negative number will smush it against the bed. Okay, kind of difficult to see. Let me lower the camera a little bit more. Okay, so now you can see that the printing, can you see how thick this line is? So see how thick that line is. Now this would be a normal skirt. Like right now it would go into the center there and start printing our piece. Here we're doing a brim. For tutorial reasons, I'm trying to get you to understand that these lines have to be smushed toward the bed enough. Okay, and you can see if we change our numbers, see how that got really thin? Watch this come back around. Watch how thin that got. Can you see that it changed the thickness? We don't want that thin. That's too thin. It's smashing it too much. So we're changing it here. So 0.399 is too much. So let's go to 299. Okay, so now we're at 299. You can see all these different thicknesses now, because that's us playing around. Look how thin that is in the middle. That's terrible. So now we have a pretty good line right here. And we're at negative 0.299. So you can see once you get your line set up, you see how thick it is. You want these lines to kind of touch each other. Otherwise it'll just break apart when you get your final print done. So now we have everything lined up nice and smooth. It's sticking to the bed. You can't pick that off with your fingernail if you tried. The bed's gonna have to cool down. We'll have to use a putty knife, which they give you. So does that make sense to you? I hope I've explained this as best I can. But now it's going to get to the actual, you can see the part now coming to life. It's pretty cool, huh? So the interior is the actual size of the piece. But we're building it, like I said, we're not doing a skirt, which would only be 3 lines. So you'd have to do your tuning in 3 lines. So now we're ready to print. Here it goes. It's going to start printing the actual piece. So just for tutorial reasons, we used a brim here, so I had plenty of lines to tune to show you. And the brim is to adhere it to the bed, basically. course, now it's layering on top of it. It's hard to see, but you see the layer going on top. If that layer right now that's going on top were to droop or fall into the holes of the infill, then your design needs more infill. Does that make sense? Sorry, I just want to jump in there real quick. Alright, so it's just about done. Let me jump in here real quick. So you can see here on the screen, so we're at 99%. And now it's done. Okay, so now we're at 100% done, and it's going to cool down. Alright, there's our piece. It's completely finished printing. Let me zoom out for you. In the set, Savoll gives you a putty knife. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, the edge of that, the front edge of that putty knife was garbage. I mean, it was really scratching everything up. So I had to go out to the garage and get some tools and file that by hand, nice and smooth. And then I also gave it a little bit of an edge. I don't know if you can see that or not. I didn't give it like a blade or a knife edge, but, you know, similar. So now we're going to grab our piece so you can see. Let me zoom in a little bit. So as you can see, we did the script, so that keeps that piece adhered to the bed, and I've found that I don't need that anymore, but for this tutorial I wanted to put it in there. So we just scrape our piece off of the bed. Okay, so we're done with the putty knife. And then I wanted you to notice here, this is kind of a test strip, or it's just like unloading what's inside the this little strip here is what's unloaded from the hot end. And because remember the 0.29 on the baby step, this won't adhere. See how that just comes? I mean, it just comes right off of there because it's not being pushed against the bed. We'll jump at the end of the video. We'll jump back at the bench, and I'm just kind of draw a little bit so I can explain that. But this piece is completely done. It took about a half an hour. All right, so you can see this base here I got from a garage sale for like $5, and this is a steel base. At the top you'd put like an angle grinder on it. I just put a piece of wood, and so I can put all my tools and my alcohol and all my stuff down in there, and then everything's kind of set up. You can see I got my SD card information, all the SD cards and stuff down here. So everything's done. We have our print. Everything's finished. The bed's cooling down. The hot end's cooling down. Now, when I'm done printing something, let me zoom in a little bit. When I'm finished printing, I just cut this. I just get my little cutters here, and I just cut that. So that's it. I leave this little stem in here because when I heat the bed back up and I heat the hot end back up, I could push that down and then pull it out real quick, and the suction it provides will clear that hot end. I think if you try to pull it out when it's all gooey and stuff right now, you're gonna leave space for oxygen to get in. I don't know. I think it's best just to leave it in. And then the spool itself, I just take that spool off and I put it back in my bag with the desiccant. So that's it. As far as a 3D printer, I really like it. I think it's a great 3D printer. It's done almost 100 pieces very accurately for me. So right out of the box, and trust me, I am no 3D expert. I've watched some tutorials, and yeah, there's quite a bit of information online about them. And this thing is so close to an Ender 3, but there's some certain things that they've done. They've got 2 drive motors. They got direct drive. There's other things. It can print TPU right out of the box. So I like the printer. I don't know if I'm going to do any real videos about the printer itself. I just kind of wanted to show my way how I'm doing it. And you know, let's jump back to the bench and we'll look at this a little closer and close this video out. All right, so we have our piece here. So it's all printed up. It's got that edge on there. So this skirt, we'll have to just pop that off. It rips off real easy because it's just one layer. It's really thin. I want to zoom in on this layer just a little bit to kind of explain a little bit more. But there's our piece. It's all finished, and I have a handful. I thought I laid one out, but the servo, you can see in this one, the servo arm, I could just place into that hole, snip it nice and flush, and it's ready to go. So if I were to break these or chew the gears off or something like that, I've crashed quite a few of them trying to train myself to fly that rescue drone. Has been a lot of fun and quite a challenge. So these are disposables or consumables, if you will. But let's look at this real close. Okay, so we got our piece here. This gives you a good idea of, so when I'm doing the baby step, kind of baby stepping the Z-axis, you can see this is really thin right here. So this here was kind of a positive on the first layer, and then I did like a negative 0.299, and then here I went to a positive, or 000, and it was just laying the bead on the bed, so that line's not going to adhere. And then this thick band right here, it's actually transparent. You can basically see right through it. Okay, that's really thinned out. So we went like negative, I think it was negative 0.499, and then here we went negative 0.299 for the rest of the print. I really think, just trying to film it and get lighting, and I was worried about, trying to get all that stuff set up. I kind of went a little bit thin. I think I could have went negative 0.199 instead of 0.299, negative 0.299. Because this is a little bit smushed. So let's look back at the bench. Let me draw. I would like to draw something to kind of explain it a little bit more. Okay, let me just clear this stuff out of the way real quick. Get some fresh paper in here for you. So what we did is we did the baby Z steps. Okay, so we did 0.000, and then we did 0.299, and then, I'm sorry, negative. I got to keep remembering that. And then we did a negative, I think I went up to 499. That was the really thin band. That's not going to work. And what we should have done, we went back to negative 0.299. We should have went to negative 0.199. I think that would have been the ideal. So anyways, when the extruder head, so here's the extruder head, here's the little orifice, so your hot end kind of looks like this, okay, and then your filament's coming down through here, it's being melted and pushed out from force behind it. As it comes out of the extruder end, that bead that it's creating right there, that should, let's blow this up, that bead should have a flat edge to it, and then it should be rounded. Okay, you don't want your bead to be round because it's not going to stick to the bed at all. Remember, I could just pick it away. It's not going to adhere. And then in our case, we probably did something more along the lines of this, where the orifice or the tip extruding the bead was scraping the top of that. So the negative 0.199 should have gave us more of something like this, where the bead is kind of flat edge, and then it's rounded all the way around. And then the next bead would run into it, okay? And then they would adhere. So this one right here was probably more like that, where it's just completely squashed and you could see right through it. Does that make sense? Like this is no good because it's not going to stick to the bed. And this is no good because you're not getting the filament out. Your head is stuck, and then your piece, as it's building layers, the bottom pieces are going to sticking out way far. I think they call it elephant foot, where the bottom is going to stick way out, and then it's going to bulge your piece, and it'll build up, and then finally it'll kind of fix itself a little bit, depending on how tall you are. So this is just really basic kind of things that I found to make it easier, and so the prints would come out nice and smooth and even. So getting this right was helpful to me. If you do it differently, or you're a super expert at 3D printing, leave in comments. If you have a detailed video, like I said, leave a description explaining what you're trying to show, and that way people can go check that out and learn more. So it looks like we got everything all put together here. Hey, you know what? I looked around. I searched and searched for a video that kind of went through the whole spiel, and I just didn't find what I was looking for. So I hope this is helpful to you. This is the video, I guess, if you will. This is the video that I had looked for and couldn't find. But I appreciate your time. I hope this helped you out. If it did, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Man, if you hated it, give me a thumbs down. It all works. Enjoy the breeze.